Did you have any idea what you wanted to do with your life at age 4? Well, me neither. Renowned violinist Joshua Bell joins me today at the Sunset Marquis. Over dinner and drinks, we dish on life as a world-touring classical musician. A bit more about my guest. Joshua Bell's career spans more than 30 years as a soloist, chamber musician, recording artist, and conductor. Joshua Bell is one of the most celebrated violinists today. Bell has recorded more than 40 CDs, garnering Grammy, Mercury, Gramophone, and Echo Classic Awards. And he is the recipient of the Avery Fisher Prize. Named the music director of the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields in 2011, he is the only person to hold this post since Sir Neville Marriner formed the orchestra in 1958. And according to Interview magazine, Joshua Bell's playing does nothing less than tell human beings why they bother to live. In September 2016, Sony Classical released Bell's newest album, For the Love of Brahms, with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields cellist Stephen Isserlis and pianist Jeremy Dank. His Live from Lincoln Center TV special with the Chamber Orchestra of Havana will air on December 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern on PBS. So what to order for one of the most famous violinists of our time? Well, performing on your feet for hours at a time requires stamina. So I order in healthy albacore tuna poke, serrano chili and avocado bruschetta, charred octopus, and a fennel-seared tuna salad, all from the Cavatina restaurant at the Sunset Marquis. And what goes best with this? My very favorite Kendall-Jackson Vintners Reserve Sauvignon Blanc. Grown 85% in Lake County, California, it has tasting notes of honeysuckle, ripe pear, and fresh lemongrass, along with hints of fresh tropical grapefruit and fig to round out this mineral, crisp, aromatic wine. So sit tight, grab your own glass of Kendall-Jackson wine, and listen in. After a quick word about podcasts, and a word from Chef's Choice and Kendall-Jackson Winery, I'll be right back with virtuoso Joshua Bell. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, The Dinner Party with Elysabeth Alfano, on iTunes. Just search for The Dinner Party, or if SoundCloud is your thing, you can find me there too by searching for The Dinner Party. Subscribe and you'll never have to hunt for great, engaging interviews again. They'll just land on your computer or your iPhone every time a new podcast comes out. So subscribe now to The Dinner Party Podcast with me, Elysabeth Alfano, because the best conversations really do happen over dinner. Kendall-Jackson is a proud sponsor of The Dinner Party Podcast with Elysabeth Alfano. Kendall-Jackson believes it's not what you're drinking to, it's who you're drinking with. Before your next dinner party, visit kj.com to explore Kendall-Jackson's diverse collections of high-quality California wines, from Vintners Reserve Chardonnay, America's favorite Chardonnay for more than 24 years, to their newest release of Vineyard Designate wines. Kendall-Jackson's got a wine you'll love. Enjoy Kendall-Jackson responsibly. Kendall-Jackson Winery, Santa Rosa, California. Chef's Choice is the brand you can trust for all your sharpening needs. Chef's Choice highly acclaimed knife sharpeners are used by home chefs, professionals, and outdoor enthusiasts around the world. Chef's Choice has a passion to create the very best. Whether you're seeking advanced engineered waffle makers, kettles, food slicers, knife sharpeners, and more, Chef's Choice is the brand you can trust. For more information, visit chefschoice.com or call 800-342-3255. Facebook Live. So I know very few things about real lives of classical musicians, except sometimes they run late. This I do know. So
sorry, when I was coming from another
Yes.
a TV show that they're never on time. So
yes, no worries.
But thank you for waiting
No,
for
don't
me.
be
And I'm
silly.
starving too because I
Yes.
haven't eaten since breakfast.
Oh, well, gosh, and it's 2:45 here now in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. So we're gonna dig in, folks. We're gonna eat. We have a bunch of great things.
Looks good.
Joshua Bell, famed classical violinist here, eating with me. And I'll just tell you a couple of things about what we've got. So I've got a tuna fennel salad. He's got albacore poke poke. We've got charred octopus and some avocado bruschetta. And a little bit of wine.
Bruschetta, you know.
Bruschetta, please.
Bruschetta. It's the hard
please.
CH.
Thank you for
Sorry.
telling me. No, bruschetta. I should know this because at the age of 14, you played with Riccardo Muti.
Ricciardo. No, I'm joking. That's okay.
We just started on wine. Oh my gosh.
I did when I was 14.
Yes.
He gave me my big break. The great conductor Riccardo Muti with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and that sort of started my career. So I'm very grateful to him and the Philadelphia Orchestra, and now I go back to that orchestra very often. And I hadn't played with him for many years until recently. We did a tour together in Europe. It was nice to get reacquainted.
Now he's with the Chicago Symphony
He's with the Chicago
Orchestra,
Symphony,
which
yeah,
is wonderful.
And
Yes.
so
And I saw your tours. You're going all around the world, but I don't see you going to Chicago.
I do go to Chicago. I played almost every summer at Ravinia Festival.
Yes,
and,
sure.
And I play recitals at Orchestra Hall very often, and occasionally with the orchestra, Chicago Symphony, there as well. So perhaps not as often as I play in New York City, where I live, but I love coming to Chicago.
Yeah, it's
a great city. My sister lived there, and it's not far from where I grew up, which is Indiana, Bloomington, Indiana.
Yes,
Yeah.
Midwestern
Yeah.
boy. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So, how many people know what they want to do with their lives at the age of 4?
Well, I didn't.
Well,
Not yet.
That's
Not-
good, because that would make me feel really bad. But I think at 4, your parents found you playing around with rubber bands
That's right.
that you would put around
My dresser
chest
drawers.
of drawers, so that
and
you
I
could
would
pluck
I would
them.
pluck the strings and try to create different pitches as when I would open up the drawers and make them higher pitches. I was fascinated with the whole string thing, how you could increase the tension and make higher pitches, and so I was trying to figure that out as a 3-year-old, and then now this is what I do for a living is play with the physics of the violin so it's funny that became my life.
And did you know, I mean, maybe not at 4, of course, but early on you must have known you were destined to be a musician? You wanted
I don't
to
know.
be a
Actually,
musician?
my very first interview I was 7 years old, and I was playing with the Bloomington Symphony, and there was a kids radio show that I was a guest on as a 7-year-old, and they asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I did not say music. I said detective or scientist.
Okay.
So
So you were a regular kid.
I guess so, yeah. And then I was also into sports and played a lot of tennis and basketball and loved that as well. So it wasn't until I was about 12 years old that I started thinking this could be my life. And then I sort of fell into it professionally, started getting paid for it little by little, and it's like all of a sudden I was a professional musician. Yeah.
So 12 is still quite young.
It is. It
yes.
is.
And did you know, I want the violin? I want this
Yes.
instrument right
Well,
away?
the violin, my parents gave me the violin when I was 4, and I that was my instrument. It's sort of like you're teaching someone a language at a young age. It just becomes internalized. I couldn't imagine not playing the violin after that. Can I eat while I talk?
That's what we do here.
starving.
Yes, no, please. I'm glad you're
So-
comfortable enough to eat. Yes.
So the violin, we had a piano in the house. My mother played, my sisters played piano. I never really gravitated to the piano. The violin was really my thing, and still, of course, obviously still is.
Is it just because you started on the violin early? Or is there something particular to that instrument, the timbre or...
I don't know. I really don't know. It's hard to say because it's
Yes.
just been part of my life for so long that I hardly remember not playing the violin.
Right.
So if they had given me a cello, maybe I would have... I mean, I tended to, as a kid, I was very good at focusing when I needed to. So like for practicing, or I would want to master something, whether it was, I would go on the basketball court and I would say, I'm going to hit 30 free throws without missing one, and otherwise I'm not going home, and I would just do it until I would get, I had that kind of a little bit obsessive So maybe if it had been a cello, I would have done the same thing. But so I don't know. But the violin is. I'm glad that my parents gave me the violin and not the tuba or something, because it's no offense to tubists, but the violin, there are a lot more opportunities for work.
Sure. I can see that. Now I'm guessing when you started at 12, the way you practiced was quite different than how you practice now. Has the way you practice evolved, or is it the same?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've learned how to practice. I've learned what to practice for. The way I think about music is very different now than I'm looking at different things in the music, about the phrasing, about the meanings, the very subtle meanings that are in the music that I probably I wasn't as aware of. I was more instinctual as a 12-year-old. I kind of played the way it affected me, which is actually really important in music. Yes. One can actually become too intellectualized with music, and you lose that instinctive way of playing. And so I gotta sometimes remind myself just to go for what because I'm much more knowledgeable now, but sometimes that can even get in the way.
I think that's actually a gift to learn early on, to remain so present and to allow yourself to not have these other things that are competing in your mind, but really go with that visceral feeling.
Yeah. I was a sort of a shy kid. I mean, I wasn't big on getting up in front of the class and giving presentations or whatever. But when it came to music, you gave me a violin. I was just happy to be in front of as many people as possible. That was where I felt comfortable.
In a way, you're so lucky, so early on, to know exactly what brings you such joy. I always call this the bingo effect, where your passion meets your skill set. And at a very young age, I mean, many people struggle well into their 60s to find where they can be of value, where they can make an impact, where their passion brings them to, what they're really good at, as well.
I mean, I tried golf for a while, and my passion was there. My skill set never arrived.
I think that's a lot of us.
So, because I thought that game would be perfect for me. You need both. You do need
lucky
both.
For us. Well, lucky for us, we'll leave golf to others. Well, so that was kind of my next question, though. Can anyone be great at classical music if you practice?
Well,
or is it more than that?
Great. I mean, these are terms that it's hard to define what that means.
Yes, fair enough.
Everyone can play classical music. Everyone can enjoy classical music. Everyone has something to say. In acting, can anyone act? Yes. Can everyone be Meryl Streep? Obviously not. We know that's not the case. But there's room for all kinds of people, all kinds of musicians, all kinds of. I always think that if you have something to say with your art or music, there's always room for you. There's not like a certain amount of slots available, But
there's room for your voice.
Exactly, and but when it comes to being a professional musician, it has to come from your passion for it can't be about wanting to be famous or wanting to, be rich or whatever. It's really it's a calling, and being a musician is more than just a job. And I know many people who are not professional musicians, but they may be surgeons, but they're still musicians because they live for music and they play amateur very intensely. So it's more of a way of life than actual profession.
So my next question is a little tricky, and I'm probably going to stumble as I try to get this out. It's a bit of a complex question, but it really impacted me. So I love classical music. My parents took me to listen to classical music at a very early age at the CSO. They on Saturdays they had classes for kids and some music appreciation. I mean, I took piano lessons as well, but clearly I wasn't going anywhere. But there were, classes on Saturdays for kids, music appreciation. I love classical music. If I don't get enough of it, I miss it. It soothes me. I hear it. Okay. I know that something else is going on at a different level that I'm just not getting, or I'm not tuned into, or I haven't been trained for. An example. I was traveling alone in Portugal, and I ended up staying at it. This is your chance to eat, because this will take me a while to get out.
Go ahead. Take your time.
So I was traveling alone in Portugal, and I was staying at a B&B, and the woman who owned this B&B had Alzheimer's. And she couldn't remember anything. It was very hard for her to stay with conversations, but she had been a classical pianist as a child. And she remembered all music. And when she played music, she no longer had Alzheimer's. It was fascinating. So here I am, but there must be 70 years difference, 60 years difference between us at the time when I'm traveling. So we're generations apart, countries apart. And she said, well, if you're by yourself sitting here in the B&B, I'd love to play for you. So, because she was sitting and playing already as it was. So I said, wonderful. And she said, I'm playing Moonlight Sonata. Maybe people know this. So I'm going to butcher it, but just to give people a sense. Da, 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 da. I mean, I'm butchering it.
Sorry.
Do that dum-da-dum again. No, do that again. Would you mind? Because I'm going to...
Okay. You want to do the left hand? I'll do the right hand?
No. I'll let you do it solo.
I was trying to do both, but it's not so easy.
Not
and
easy.
Eat at the same time.
And, yes, well, you're multi-talented. So there's a point in Moonlight Sonata where... Da, 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 da. Okay. While she was playing, she said, this is where he's weeping. This is where he has unrequited love. This is where he has sorrow. Now, I never would have gotten, I've heard Moonlight Sonata how many times? I never would have gotten that on my own. And she interpreted, for lack of a better expression, translated for me. And it marked me so much because it went from being Moonlight Sonata, something that I love, that I've heard in church and is meaningful to me, to Beethoven speaking to me. Beethoven telling me how he felt, and I understood. And it became music on a whole other level. And my question for you is there any, because I think most people are like me, they like classical music, but maybe they don't feel it to that degree. And I wondered, is there any composer for you in particular that has special meaning or resonance, and can you take us through that and why?
Wow.
It's a hard question.
You're so right. I mean, first of all, the Moonlight Sonata, I mean, as far as I know, he didn't write in the music weeping here.
No, he didn't. This was
I'm joking.
Yes. Okay,
I'm joking, but so really, different people will have different reactions to it. I think very few of them will say this is where he's, thinking about throwing a party for his friends, because it's a dark and inward. But I think there are still many ways to interpret it, and it's a matter of allowing yourself to really go there and really try to find what that music is doing to you, and that it's valid. What you feel is valid. That's the beautiful thing about classical music, is that you're participating as an audience member. It's not just washing over you. It's you actually are participating. It's interacting with your cognitive brain and your emotions at the same time. You listen to Bach, you feel this part of your brain that does math. You feel it going. You feel feeling the architecture of it. You're feeling the symmetry of how he did this here, and then he does it here, and you feel that being stimulated. But you also feel the emotional side. Music somehow balances those two parts of the brain in a way that I think no other art does.
Logical and emotional.
Yes, and that's what's I think is so incredible about it, and so for me, as you get to know pieces, the other great thing about classical music, the more you get to know a piece like the Moonlight Sonata or Brahms Symphony, or you find more and more things in it. It gets better and better and better. So I always think compare it to film, which I love film, but if you've seen a film a couple of times, unless it's The Godfather or a few exceptions, you kind of how it goes. You don't want to see it so many times.
Yeah.
But you can listen to because it's more abstract, it's more of an abstract art, you can listen to a Beethoven symphony 1,000 times and still feel like, oh, I'm still discovering it. I'm actually enjoy it more the 1,000th time than the first time. And so I have that feeling with when I drink wine, by the way, that I feel like I'm missing the levels. Like I know when you drink wine, there's more to it, and as you get to know wine, you actually really appreciate the subtleties. So I'm working at it.
Well, you're doing a good job. I'm glad I can help here. Well, thank you for that. I do agree. Music to me, and I think food can do this as well. You can have different dishes at different times, and they can take on different meanings. And food also, I say food and music really, are the two things that don't need language. So you can go anywhere in the world and bridge a gap with music and food. Less so with theater, less so with film, even with dance, less so because it can be very particular to cultures and maybe, a Hawaiian dance might mean less to me, but music just transcends, and I think food does that too. So very,
true.
very special there. In fact, I'm sort of jumping ahead in my questions, but I think you're working on a multidisciplinary arts week in residence coming up
at the Kennedy Center in Washington.
Yes, with other disciplines.
Yeah, so we have a we're still working it out, so I'm not sure I know exactly the details of it, but we have, over a course of a week, I'm doing a lot with the Kennedy Center, sort of helping to curate a week of. I love the festival atmosphere. So you get a children's concert, you get a symphony concert, you get some chamber music, there's a story that was a children's story called The Man with the Violin, which was written with me as sort of one of the characters. It was because it was based on the experiment in the metro station in Washington that I did 9 years ago. But that we're now commissioned a composer, Ann Dudley, to write music for the story, and we're going to premiere it in Washington. So that's another thing. And there is a food event, Gourmet Symphony, I think they're calling it. And so, we're still working on how we're going to combine the food and music. But I enjoy doing that. I've done dinners at my house, charity dinners and things like that, where I've combined food, celebrity chefs. I've had amazing chefs in my own apartment in New York, like Thomas Keller from Jean Georges. Hopefully, he's supposed to do one for my friend Paul Haggis, his charity, next year. I love doing these events where we do music and a chef making food, and we try to pair. We did an event for Krug Champagne where we paired different pieces with the vintages of Krug, and so it's a lot of fun to mix those mediums.
It is, and it's so informative. They're so enjoyable to see how one art form informs another, and so how music can affect food and vice versa. Maybe the wine affects the music playing, or how these things intertwine. It can be very exciting. So this is going to take place in Washington, D.C.
Yes, in the springs.
Ooh, lucky people who get a ticket to this. Or it must be invitation only, I'm guessing. Or
no, it'll be part of a festival at the Kennedy Center that people can buy tickets for.
Wonderful. And I know you mentioned your experiment, Washington Post experiment that you did 9 years ago, and I know you've talked about it just a gazillion, because it was such a fascinating experiment. So we won't stay on that for a while, because I know you're
as a science lover, which I am. I don't even like to use the word experiment because it's not. It wasn't very scientific or controlled in any way, as for any of you scientists out there. But it was more of a sort of a, I don't want to say stunt, but it was a. Anyway, we'll call it experiment.
Well, for me, I'll say it was sort of like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Let's see if it sticks.
See what happens.
You just don't know how it's going to shake out. And it was very interesting, the results. So many people know them already. But I wondered if you took anything away from that changed how you played in the classical setting, be it an orchestra hall or some concert hall.
I can't say it really made me play differently, but I was not surprised by the lack of sort of response from an audience that you're throwing music at while they're rushing to work, because like we just talked about, the interactive experience is not there when you're rushing to work. So really the part of the equation is not there. So I totally, the journalist Gene Weingarten, who won the Pulitzer Prize for this, really didn't know what was going to happen. I said, it's not. No, you don't think people are going to start crowding around, because music, unless you're, especially music that Bach and things like, you really need that captive, the atmosphere and the sense of occasion, which really makes it something special. Yes. And some people like read into it, that we're, our society is falling apart, and we don't pay, or that maybe. Other people, said, well, it just goes that only if you're hyped, the people will know what quality is, and maybe, that's not really, I think they were missing the point. And some people told me, why didn't you play at this place? Because people are used to hearing musicians. The whole point of the stunt was to do it in a place where people were not used to listening to music. It was not a venue in any sense. So anyway, it made me certainly appreciate, after doing that, it made me appreciate more having a captive audience, and made me think about these things we're talking about in a more, maybe more consciously.
What I took from it mostly was how children couldn't help but stop and pay attention. And
Well, I think that, which is actually absolutely true, that I remember a lot of children going by and wanting to pay attention. Let's not dramatize it, because what's romanticize the idea that children understand art and that we've lost it when we get older. There's something to that. Actually, there is something to that. I have to say, children innately, we know that if you give a child some crayons and a paper, they're going to draw. They really love creating, and they love, and maybe as they get older, they are not encouraged to continue that. So there is something to that. But there's also something that kids have, is just a general curiosity about the world.
Yes.
And the kids that walk by probably had done that with their parents many times, and they had other times had not seen a violinist playing, and I think they were just like, something is different today, and
Shock
kids
and
are
awe.
kids are more tuned into like something is different. As adults, we just get sort of we're so used to tuning everything out.
You
and
have
I think
an agenda as an adult.
It's
you
true.
have to get to work. Work means a paycheck. Paycheck feeds
Exactly.
that kid. So everything has to move along for sure. But one of the other neat things about it is, well, neat from my perspective. So you run around town, as you did in that example in the subway, with an almost $4 million violin.
Oh
Is
yes,
this
well,
correct?
it's worth a lot more than that now.
It is.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, because they've gone. That was many years ago. That it was the best investment I ever made. Even though I had to mortgage my life away for my violin. But anyway, it's not. There is really no value. No.
Because there's no real comparison. You couldn't.
You can't make one. You can't.
If you lost it, you couldn't buy another. Right.
So it's I was playing in that occasion. I was playing on the Stradivarius violin I am the, I guess, owner, you would say, of it now. But it's been around for 303 years. It was made in 1713, and has a great history, and it's incredible. So that's an amazing privilege for me to get to play on it.
So, and again, I'm romanticizing this probably because I've seen it in a movie, so it's not like I know this personally, but Jacqueline Dupre.
Oh, Jacqueline Dupre, yes.
She had sort of a love-hate relationship with her violin. And there was a true sort of like you, me,
Her cello.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, excuse me, of course, her cello. And I'm wondering, is there a special relationship? There must be.
Yeah, it's like it's your companion, and definitely there's love-hate. I mean, it's mostly love, but there are times where it's not. It's because it changes every day, the way it responds, the weather, the way. There's some days where it's just like we just get along perfectly, and it just does everything I want. I guess it's like a jockey and a horse. There's some days where the horse, a jockey would say they're one, and there are other times where you just don't feel it, and it's.
I would say all relationships are
I
like
was
this.
starting to. That would have been. I was staying away from the obvious. But yeah, so it is a relationship that's very special. And finding the right violin is really like finding, your soulmate, and so I happened to stumble upon mine in 2001 in London one afternoon, and at a shop. I was playing at the Royal Albert Hall that night, a concert on my other Stradivarius, which was a great violin, the one that I owned, and I went into the shop for some mundane reason to get something. A very famous violin shop, and they said the Huberman Strad is here just for today. It's on its way to Germany to be shown to some collector, that might buy it. And I tried it, and I said, "This is my violin." And I played on it that same night. I played on it at the Royal Albert Hall in front of 7,000 people. And I felt that comfortable immediately. Yeah, which is very unusual. Usually you take a good month to really start to understand the violin, which I did, but still I still got to know it much better later, but I still loved it so much I didn't want to play on anything else.
But you weren't able to buy that violin that day.
No. But they let me test drive it.
But yes, but what I mean is, then after playing at Albert Hall that night, how did you get that violin again, or how did you come to that violin?
Well, it was luckily I had bought a Stradivarius earlier on in my career. It was actually I had two previously, so I'd kind of worked my way up and that helps the pay for this new one, which was on another higher level. Collector value was higher, but I managed to find a way to sell my violin, and I actually had a deadline of when it had to be. I had to have the money, and I basically got the money on the day of the deadline. 7 weeks later, it was like one of these miracles that someone bought my violin and my other violin, and I got the money. In the meantime, 9/11 happened. And the person that was buying the violin was affected by all that in the stock market. What crashed, and it's like I thought, this is it. It's all gonna. No. I mean, of course, not that I'm thinking about myself and my violin, which I was. Unfortunately, I was so in love with this violin, but I thought the whole thing was gonna fall apart, but it didn't, and now I own it.
Wow, that's an incredible story because it so could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
And although I bet there aren't very many people really in the market for. I mean, there are collectors and there are musicians.
Well, there's unfortunately most of the great violin strads nowadays. First of all, aren't be afforded by someone who plays on it. I mean, and so it takes a certain kind of collector. Luckily, there's many collectors and foundations that buy them, and then they lend them so that they can be heard and played, which is nice. But so often they get put behind glass and you never hear them again. You know.
Does that affect the violin to not be
probably?
played?
I mean, it preserves them, but when you.
It's like a good rug. It's meant to be walked on, and it almost gets better with walking on.
Maybe there is certainly something about getting the violin vibrating, and I've had the privilege of playing once a concert on probably the most valuable violin in the world, which is the Paganini Guarnerius that's kept behind glass in Genoa, Italy. Paganini was the greatest figure in violinist in the 19th century. We don't have any recordings of him but he was sort of the superstar violinist, and his Guarneri was when he died, he donated it to the city of Genoa, and there is no price on it. It's considered the most valuable, but occasionally they lend it out. And I once played a concert in Genoa. They let me play on his violin, and they had armed guards on stage with me, right behind me while I was playing. I don't know if they were worried I was going to run off with it, or
like my music, you're in for it.
I mean, interesting enough, my violin that I have now, the Huberman, was stolen.
Twice.
And so it's quite famous for the fact that it was stolen from Huberman, the great violinist, in 1936. So my violin has a bit of an intrigue to it.
Yes, by a fellow musician.
Well, he was
an aspiring.
It was stolen by a violinist, and that's why there was no attempt to sell it, because if he had, it probably would have been discovered, but the thief played on it for 50 years, and then admitted at the end of his life on his deathbed, at least that's the dramatized version of it, that he had stolen the violin.
Well, so you bring me to the life of a world-class, sexy violinist. Sorry, people, I'm not the only one. I mean, it's an incredible life, or is it? And I ask this because you think of a violin, or a classical pianist, or a classical musician, the best wines, the best caviar, they travel. This is what you think if you're not part of this world. They travel the world, everything's long gowns, sycophants, followers, collectors, money, I mean, if you're not part of this world. But then I've learned things about you like bowling, or I think you like to bowl, isn't this right? Yes. So bowling, not something you would naturally put in that category. Also, the classical friends that I know in Chicago, they're always late. Their apartments are a mess. These sorts of things. So I wonder how much of the dramatized, romanticized life is really in the daily life of a world-renowned musician. Is it all glamour? That's what
it's certainly not all glamorous. I mean, I'm not sure. Let's put these in perspective here. I mean, we're sitting right now in LA, in a place where there are really famous, glamorous people walking by this bar very often. We're at the hotel where last time I was here, Sting walked by, and who's actually a friend of mine, and we've played together. But he gets stopped a lot more often than I do. Sure. So let's put things in perspective here.
Even that, I think, is different because, and I'm just going off of, and that is the point of the question. I'm going off of grossly stereotyped ideals. So when you think of rock stars, you don't always think of high-end sophistication, although of course it can be, because these are horrible stereotypes. When you think of a classical musician, you always think of best educated.
Yeah,
You see what I mean? And
Well,
I'm wondering how much of beyond the world of music do you step out, like all of us, to the average pizza joint or you know what I mean? How much of life is this?
Yeah, it's
world tour?
it's a combination of I appreciate fine things. I really do. I love good wine. I love great when I go to Europe, I tour my way through the Michelin guide.
Oh,
you
you
know,
do?
and
Oh,
like
you
I
do?
love
Yes.
love.
Good
Free, I'm going to go to Japan in November, and I'm already planning and making reservations for my dining experiences. But when I, in LA, I also go to In-N-Out Burger, and I love more casual type things. I love a good burger. I mean, I do happen to have a weakness for good hamburgers, and I like to bowl, and I like to do to normal stuff like anybody else. I guess video games. Was addicted to video games as a child, which you might not think classical music and video games. But
well, what amazes me is that you have the time, because when I look at your travel schedule, just the time on a plane, I mean, and the jet lag to get accustomed to each place, I mean, you're not in any one place for very long.
That's true, and that's the part that people think may be glamorous, the traveling part, which
It's got to be exhausting.
it can be exhausting. I don't always get to see, I just went to Prague for 3 days a week ago, and realized when I was leaving that I had not seen a single site. Yeah. I had went straight to rehearsal, was in my hotel room resting for the concerts because I was nervous about the repertoire, and I was just keeping myself ready for the shows. And then I left at 5 a.m. to fly back to New York, and I realized everyone said, "You went to Prague, isn't it a gorgeous city?" And I said, "It is, but you know what? I really didn't get a chance to see."
Yes.
There's also a sense that I'll be back because I do go often, so it's not like I'm here, I'm a tourist. I'm not there that way. So it's not always so glamorous, that part of traveling. It's but having said that, it suits my life. I love the fact that no 2 days are the same. That I meet different people. I have friends. I do have friends in almost every city in the world after 30 years of doing this. So it's always a reunion with old friends. Every city I go to, it's like you kind of resume where you left off, and that suits me. I'd say 99 out of 100 people would not enjoy this kind of traveling schedule.
I think that's the most attractive thing to me, is that you have friends, really good friends actually, because a lot of them you've played with, even if you're meeting in France, you've played with them in Berlin or what have you. So you have this network of people who move around the world like you do, so you can say to someone, "Hey, I'm in Berlin next week. Are you?" And even though they live in Singapore, they might be in Berlin, because
it's possible.
Equally as
and we live in an age where it's that kind of communication is much more easy. With Facebook and emails, and
yes.
You can keep track of where people are, and it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah. I would think it is. So I'm wondering about life at home. Like, is there anything, like, for example, I became vegan except for fish. So I don't eat dairy and I don't eat meat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did that this year, and I have to say I love it. Absolutely love it. But what
What is that, a pescatarian?
It's a pescatarian who doesn't eat dairy.
Okay.
If you can follow that. And I love it, I should say. I absolutely love it.
Pescatarian sounds like a character on the Game of Thrones.
It sounds something like you might not be feeling well. I don't know. And it's made me really step up my game for kitchen utensils at home, because all I do is chop vegetables. I mean, I chopped vegetables before.
I
but
never
now,
chop vegetables.
Oh,
ever.
Oh, that's all I do. And I don't want to
because I'm afraid of chopping more than vegetables.
Oh. Well, see, now that's interesting. I would think you wouldn't bowl because you'd be afraid
I
of
shouldn't
something
bowl.
so heavy.
I shouldn't bowl. Yeah, it's not the best.
I would think.
But
it's funny that you bowl to me. What's the interest in bowling?
I've gone through phases. I don't bowl very often anymore, but I've gone through phases of everything: billiards, not cricket, snooker.
Snooker, what's that?
Snooker is the British version of billiards. It's much more complex and really much more difficult than pool. But now I'm terrible at it. I went through golf. So I've gone through all these things. Bowling at one time, I got obsessed with bowling. 229 was the best I ever bowled, and that was at a sort of fundraising, sort of like a celebrity tournament that I was invited to, and so I bowled a 229 and won that one. But that's the best I ever did. I'm not great at it, but I do enjoy it.
I think maybe I've bowled a 40 or something. Maybe. I'm not even sure. But 229 sounds good. I don't know what it sounds good. Well, what I was sort of getting to is that, certainly it's not like I have a Stradivarius violin, but I've become very linked to my kitchen utensils.
Right.
Because now, you can't always get vegan food out. In LA you can, but not in every city. And if you do, oftentimes it's fried, so you're getting vegan food, but then you feel like, what have I done to myself? So I cook a lot at home. I've like doubled or tripled how much I cook at home, and I love to cook. It really, like chopping vegetables soothes me. I find it really relaxing. I can it just gets out anxiety and energy, and I just love it. And so I've gotten really finicky about my knives.
Right, sure.
It's probably like, chopping on an unsharp knife is probably like playing on an untuned violin.
A sharp violin.
But I mean, it's the fastest way to become insane. Like I just try to chop a tomato with a knife that's not sharp. It'll just drive you insane. So I've become very particular about some things in my kitchen, and I wonder about your home life. If you don't cook, what do you do at home?
Well, I don't cook much because I happen to live most of the time in New York City. But I'm actually most of the time I'm on the road, so I can't cook. So I look for restaurants. When I am home, there's very little time, and there's so many great restaurants in New York.
Yes. And cooking.
And if I'm in Indiana, where my other home, my mother will cook for me. So or my sisters, yeah, and I teach at Indiana University on occasion,
nice.
And so it hasn't been a great incentive to cook, although. I think that's the next chapter in my life. I'm going to start cooking more to control a little bit more, because when you eat out, it's just it's very hard to eat healthy when you're butter. Because there's no reason why the chef wants to make it healthy they want it to taste good.
Right.
So I hired a chef a few weeks ago just for fun for a week, just to cook me meals at home. But even then, it was fantastic. But I think she was still trying to. It was more, she still wanted to make sure that it tasted good, and I think she was not making it that healthy. So because it was a trial, I'd never hired her before, and so I think she was more interested in making it taste good.
Sure.
And I was very suspicious because it tasted too good, and I'm sure it was unhealthy.
But the thing is, I find, we're sort of getting on a tangent off of music, but I find that when I work out sugar and salt from my diet, all the natural things actually taste so much better. And so I can cook at home with I happen to like things that are sweet, with regular things like sweet potatoes, and that's absolutely enough of a sweet palate for me, because I've worked sugar out of the system, because I'm controlling it at home. And it does take a lot more time, and of course it's not just the cooking, it's the shopping. So it takes more time for sure, but I feel like my energy level is almost double.
I've never been a sugar person, so I'm more of a foie gras guy. Sorry.
No,
I know it's terrible.
No! I'm always amazed you folks still exist. That's bad for the animal, but okay.
Oh, for the animal, I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yes.
Yeah, my burgers. The burger donator wasn't very happy with it either. Sorry, I just love food so much, and I love being able to go to a Michelin 3-star restaurant and say, "Bring me whatever you want."
Yes, let the chef choose.
Let the chef choose. It's something I know, and I would get criticized, and some people hate me for eating meat, but
No.
But I grew up that way, and so far my stomach is beating my conscience.
And your heart is still beating, so, at least you're not falling over. Because that's always my worry, that, it's not even that people eat red meat, or meat, period. It's that we eat so much of it. So you have bacon in your donuts, bacon in your hot chocolate, bacon in your ice cream, bacon for breakfast.
I haven't tried that.
Oh, there's a lot of bacon in ice cream flavors, bacon in chocolate bars. And then you're having, one has meat for lunch, meat for dinner. So it's not that people have to cut out meat, but even like reducing it to just dinner would be, I don't know,
maybe.
Whatever.
Moderation, I guess, is the way which I tend to do moderation in moderation. Yes, so it's not easy for me. But I do think this is not a food show exactly, but
No?
but I do think sugar seems to be a bigger enemy than the fat. That's my latest rationalization for eating burgers.
Oh,
Is
yeah,
that
no,
is that
well,
the sugars and the breads and that I think
totally
they're the
agree.
ones that are causing more health problems than. And I've been reading a lot of articles lately that have been supporting that argument.
Yeah, sugar's like smack. It is its own drug in and of
What is
itself.
smack like? I never tried it.
Well, let me tell you, as smack expert as I am, but I mean, it's for me, it's addictive because I love sweets. So you say you're not
Yeah,
really a
I've
sweet
never
person,
been
so maybe,
yeah.
Well, what is your snack of choice?
Yeah, although I I have my moments like hot brownie with vanilla ice cream and hot fudge and nuts on it. That's that kind of.
Okay, so when you go, you
Okay,
go big.
when I go, yeah, exactly. When I do it, I go big.
So what is?
But I'd rather have an extra helping of savory food than
okay,
sweets.
favorite extra helping? Like, would it be like stuffing or
like
chips or like potatoes?
Yeah, I'm trying to do less of the potatoes and the carbs lately. So,
Okay.
So I do love my meat. So if
Bacon.
I love bacon.
The whole world agrees
Even
with you and not me.
even
but-
my 6-year-old son, who for some reason just will not eat any meat ever. Like he just doesn't like meat. It makes him just nauseous. Doesn't like it. The one thing he eats is bacon.
You know what? No, this
He
is
loves bacon.
Yes, no, this is how I was as a kid. I didn't want to chew, so I didn't eat meat because it didn't feel good to chew. I don't know, and I didn't make the association with animals. I just didn't want to chew. But of course, I ate all the bacon in the world because it doesn't taste like meat at all. It tastes like some snack. You know, it's so crispy and like a little chip. You know, it's okay. But before you play, do you have a
Yeah,
favorite
actually,
snack?
that's important before you play to eat the right things.
Yes, because it's so much stamina to be, playing for
I've
hours.
tried, because I've tried the low carb diets to lose, a few pounds here and there, and it actually works. But before you play a concert, it's not always the best thing because I find my brain struggling to concentrate if I don't have enough
Sure.
that kind of immediate energy. But before I eat bananas. I like bananas before I go on stage. I think athletes do that a lot.
Sure.
I keep trying different things, trying to find the right. Usually a bowl of chicken soup or something like that before I go on stage. That's not going to sit in my stomach like a. Although I have been known to eat a big burger right before a concert, and I've survived, but it's not the best.
This is interesting that you say that because I think I read Ella Fitzgerald used to eat 2 hot dogs before she performed at Carnegie Hall.
Really?
And I know, thank you
thank
for
you.
more wine. 'Cause
I
we
don't
needed
drink
to.
before I play ever,
Oh, ever? Really? No. Okay.
I mean-
you don't feel that it loosens you a little
unless
bit
it's
to-
in my own house, like a informal concert. I might have a glass of wine,
I
but
see.
but
Yes.
never. No, I've never
Yes.
done that.
Yes.
But Ella Fitzgerald would eat
Two hot
Two hot dogs.
And I was at a classical concert in Chicago, and it was with the International Beethoven Festival. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. George Lepeau heads it up. And it was year 2 or 3 of the festival, and they brought in a conductor, and 7:30 start time. We couldn't find him. It didn't start. They actually had to get up and make an announcement that we can't find the conductor. We're going to go look for him. And he was down the block having a submarine sandwich.
Not Giordano's. That's what I eat. Last time I was there, I went and had a Giordano's. One slice of pizza, I think it had 2,000 calories.
At least, oh my word, probably in the crust alone. So do you have any, we're talking about good things like chicken broth, but do you have any, on the road travel or right before you play or right after, any snacks, any, popcorn or candy or sugar? Or,
No, I don't eat sugar right before. It just, it actually doesn't help me. But everyone finds their own things. For me, a banana has just the right amount of sugar in it, but
That's
not. If I eat a candy bar, I feel the energy,
Spiky.
but it just kind of it messes me up.
Yes.
And the whole, when you're playing on stage, it really is, your brain is really like your biggest tool. I mean, it's it has to be working in its best form, because it's very complex what you're doing. You just need it, and I really feel it when any little thing that if I didn't get enough sleep or didn't get enough, or get the right food, I feel that my brain isn't functioning the way, And there are certain days where it just feels like all cylinders are on fire, and then there are other days where and still trying to figure out what's causing that. Good sleep and so the snacks. I'll have, I think, something like a soup or a banana, something. I usually wait till after the concert to pig out.
Yeah, okay. Late dinners after concerts?
Yeah, too many.
How
Probably not healthy, but I do it. There's nothing more fun than finishing a concert, the pressure's off, and finally you can go out with the friends and the conductor and say, let's go have a nice meal and celebrate.
Yes,
you feel justified
great.
when you've just worked at night. You feel justified to eat and drink whatever you want.
This is true, but also food brings you to other people.
It's true.
And so there's that sense of you're celebrating. There's that celebratory regalness of being with friends. It's so rich, that experience after you've had this high pressure, and now you can be with friends and really enjoy. And food does that. It brings people together. Well, okay, so just one final question for you. You don't cook, but I hear you throw great parties. So you bring chefs together with musicians, and you combine music,
I really love
sometimes
that.
in your own house, and which is how I actually started this show. Is I was doing a show on PBS in Chicago, and I would interview a movie director and a musician and a comedian and a fashion designer, and I thought, well, I know all these cool people and they don't know each other. So I threw a dinner party at my house, and of course the musician brought his guitar, the author read from his book, the chef cooked us great food, and I thought, oh my God, this is my next show. And so I had this interdisciplinary dialogue going on, which is what I've been doing in Chicago until I came to LA, which is very recently. So I understand that thriving of bringing people together. I wondered, of all the parties that you've had, and you've had a lot, is there anyone that you'd love to have at your house for dinner or party music that you haven't had yet?
That I haven't had?
Yes.
Any person?
Or a couple, or any that you'd love to have over, even living or dead. Like maybe it's not possible to have them anymore, but
Yeah, who would I love to have? If I were to just create a dream dinner party.
Yes.
Well, let's see, that gives me a lot of people to choose from. I would say, well, from the music world, maybe Mozart or Beethoven. I mean, Beethoven would be fascinating. Or maybe Brahms. Well, I'm saying that because my new CD, For the Love of Brahms, he could tell me if my liner notes were appropriate for what I said about him. So enough about music world. Einstein, Freud. Socrates. Those are some few that would be fun.
Yes. I would like
you?
to have Daniel Barenboim.
Oh,
and the reason
he would be
is
interesting.
Fascinating.
You might be able to do that. He's still around.
He's still, yes, absolutely. He used to be with, because I'm from Chicago, he used to be with CSO. So at 9/11 happened, a quick little story, 9/11 happened, and at the time he was with CSO, and he got up on opening night of the symphony and he said, we thought about canceling, because opening night is September 11th, it just happened. We thought about canceling, but then we remembered that music is with us in everything. It's with us for the happy times and weddings, and it's with us for the funerals. So we decided we would stay and we would not alter what we're doing, but before we play our scheduled concert, we're going to, all of us, anyone who had anything to do with the symphony that night, play Samuel Barber. Adagio. And it was so moving to hear him speak about how music had brought him through every difficult time in his life, and that's why he wanted music to be with us that night. That it stayed with me, and I thought, okay, dinner, you, my house.
Interesting to me that Daniel Barenboim, who I admire very much, amazing musician, a genius really of a person, tends to like, as far as I understand, more avant-garde music, more cerebral music. But on an occasion like 9/11, he chose Barber's Adagio. It's very interesting to me, because that kind of music, which Barber and his Adagio was almost ridiculed for the fact that he resorted to the kind of incredibly melodic music, which at the time he wrote it was considered passé. It's very interesting that we go to Barber for an emotional connection, and I'm just leaving it at that.
I clearly am not the musical scholar here, but how many American composers do we have who can bring us to that emotional point? And because 9/11 and it was an American.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
I don't know.
Barbara would be my choice as well, and I happen to love Barbara. But it's this. I think the state of music at that time when he wrote was we've. Anyway, we're now. I think the composers today are more likely to go back to the idea of writing a melody, which I just maybe I'm just old. I'm very old-fashioned in what I like in my music. Music is a cerebral thing, but it's both cerebral and emotional, and you need both. And there's been a lot of experimental music that I feel that I don't connect with, so I don't. But someone else might, and let them play it. But I tend to play music that I really have to connect with emotionally. Anyway, Barbara would be one of them. Barbara's Violin Concerto is one of my favorite. But it is true that music is something that in an occasion like that, that's what it says what words can't. And it helps us grieve, helps us heal. So I remember 9/11. I had never been asked to be on Conan O'Brien's show until 9/11 happened. They were thinking, we need something something classical, something, and they asked me to go on the show and play, and I played Bernstein from Somewhere from Bernstein, because that's an American composer.
Absolutely,
in answer
right.
to your
Thank
question.
you.
And so. And I remember, that week I was in New York when that happened, 9/11 happened, and it was a very, very emotional time. And I was glad to be able to. I also went to Riverside Church like the day after, and there was this musical tribute because people didn't know what to say, but music was a way that people could start healing by just. So I participated with many other artists performing just as we were all trying to heal. So.
I love this topic because it really points out how. Again, music transcends, whether you have language or not. It can transcend for you. At the same time, 9/11, I also went to the opening of the Lyric Opera, again in September, the opening season of the Lyric. And the general manager came out and he said, we would like to ask everyone to join us in singing the national anthem. And he didn't mean just everyone who was a backstage hand, or because often people who work at the Lyric or any opera house, they maybe don't have the voice to be the lead, but they are a stage hand. They know something about opera. But he invited everyone in the audience, and of course, so many of the audience members had been amateur opera singers, and so you must have had 4,000 voices of opera.
Oh God. There's nothing worse than being at a dinner party for a birthday party for an opera singer and all their friends.
Oh yeah, they go off. Yes.
Each one trying to outdo the other. Sorry.
Well, it was very for someone who cannot sing at all. I mean, everyone around me basically was an opera singer. It marked me. But it says that how music transcends and music can speak when we have nothing else. So. Well, I want to thank you today for being with me. And you are right, because we didn't get to talk about it too much. As of September 30th, For the Love of Brahms is out. I'm guessing on Amazon, but other places as well.
I suppose so, yes.
Amazon. So, of course, For the Love of Brahms, out as of September 30th. Hit up Amazon. And I believe it is December 16th.
Yes.
You're live from
Lincoln Center.
With
Cuban musicians and Dave Matthews, the great rock star, and many others. So after my trip to Cuba, and I met all these wonderful Cuban musicians. We're bringing a lot of them over to Lincoln Center for this PBS special on Live from Lincoln Center. So I'm really excited about that. December 16th, which is Beethoven's birthday, I believe. I just realized.
And it's like his 200th and...
Oh
dear.
Yeah. Well, it would be 200 and 46.
Okay, 46. Doing the math. If someone can double check us. 240 something or other. Yes, so December 16th on PBS, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And but until then, For the Love of Brahms, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, it was fun. Thank you.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining in on The Celebrity Dinner Party with me, Elysabeth Alfano. To stay in the know, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at DinnerPartyCHGO, and on Facebook at The Dinner Party and at Elysabeth Alfano. To subscribe to this podcast, find The Celebrity Dinner Party on iTunes and on SoundCloud. And if you want to send me an email about today's podcast or anything else, you can find all my information at thedinnerparty.tv. The editor of The Celebrity Dinner Party is Joshua Snyder. The original music is by the Websters and Ship Captain Crew. Of course, for this podcast, we have special music courtesy of Joshua Bell. The track is Vivace non troppo from Joshua's newest CD, For the Love of Brahms, which also features Stephen Isserlis and Jeremy Dank. Thanks for listening today, and join me on the next Dinner Party podcast where the best conversations happen over dinner.